All right, everybody, good afternoon. I have, I think, one thing for you at the top, and then we'll get started. So, before we get started, I wanted to preview what to expect tomorrow night with President Biden delivers his third State of the Union. You will hear the president lay out the historic achievements he has delivered on for the American people and his vision for the future. Looking at what President Biden faced when he came into office and where we are now, it is clear he's got more done in the first 3 years than most presidents have accomplished in 2 terms. He will talk about the success in implementing his agenda from infrastructure to chips to lowering drug prices and getting rid of junk fees, as you heard him speak to yesterday with his competition council. He will talk about whose side he is on and his plan to improve the lives of all Americans. That includes lowering costs for Americans and giving people more breathing room, lowering healthcare premiums and taking on big pharma to lower the cost of prescription drugs, making the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share in taxes, saving our democracy and protecting our democratic institutions, protecting women's reproductive health in the face of relentless attacks from Republican elected officials, making progress on his unity agenda, ending cancer as we know it, delivering on the sacred obligation to veterans, tackling the mental health crisis, and beating the opioid and overdose pandemic. We will have more to share tomorrow, but fundamentally, the president will outline an agenda that is about continuing to build on the progress that we've made over the last 3 years. The president has always been an optimistic person, as you all know, and even in the face of challenges that we have in front of us, he will share why he is hopeful about this country's future and why it is a mistake. It is a mistake to bet against the American people. With that, Sungmin.
On Haiti, if I may. Sure. So earlier today, Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield said that the U.S. has asked the Prime Minister to, quote, move forward in a political process that will lead to the establishment of a presidential transitional council that will lead to elections. So I just want to clarify, does that mean a resignation? Did the U.S. government ask him to resign directly?
So a couple of things. We are definitely not pushing the prime minister to resign. That is not what we're doing. But we have underscored that now is the time to finalize a political accord to help set Haiti on a path to a better future. And that is something that we've been working on for some time. We've been working on that with the CARICOM, so that is nothing new. We've had those conversations, and also the Haitian partners on the path to restoring democratic order in Haiti through free and fair elections, inclusive governance, and power sharing. This will give the people an opportunity to democratically elect their prime minister. Again, this has been a conversation that we've had with Haitian partners, CARICOM, for some time now. So that is not new, and we certainly are not pushing him to resign.
Um, even though you're not directly calling on him to resign, can you just discuss the timing of why you're encouraging of this transitional government now? And also, because obviously the White House has long resisted specifically pushing for his resignation, even if you aren't doing it now. So can you just talk about the timing of this encouragement of why you're doing everything the way you are?
So again, we're not pushing, as you just stated in your question, for the prime minister to resign. This has been a long time conversation that we have had with our Haitian partners, with CARICOM, on making sure that there was a path to restoring democratic order. So that has been consistent with what we've been trying to do for some time now. And we believe, it is the Haitian people, they need to have an opportunity to democratically elect their prime minister. And so there needs to be a plan in place, obviously, to do that. And so that's what we're encouraging. But we've been having these conversations for some time now.
And one domestic matter, back in February of 2021, President Biden said Donald Trump should not be given the traditional intelligence briefings that were given to former presidents because, quote, what value is giving him an intelligence briefing? What impact does he have at all, other than the fact that he might slip and say something? Does the president still feel that way now that Donald Trump is on the way to becoming the Republican Party's nominee, and would be entitled to the briefings that a party candidate would get?
I think the president's words stand today, as he stated however long ago. I don't think his mind has changed on that. I just don't have anything to
Would you
add.
do anything to block him from getting these briefings later this year?
I don't have anything to add, but the president was very clear about how he felt about that, and I would say those comments certainly do stand today.
Thanks, Karine. Can you confirm that the White House invited the Ukraine's First Lady to the State of the Union, but that she declined to attend?
So the White House did invite Mrs. Zelenska to the State of the Union. She was unable to attend. I would refer you to Ukraine as to her reasoning why, but she did indeed. Receive an invitation from us.
And there was also an invite that went out to Navalny's wife. Can you talk a bit about how the president may address foreign policy issues? Of course, he's going to be speaking to Republicans, many of them who he wants to convince to back more funding to Ukraine.
So, look, I'm going to be really mindful and not get ahead of the president on his State of the Union remarks. So, not going to lay that out and how he's going to address Republicans, as you mentioned, who will be in front of him. But, the president, as it relates to certainly Ukraine, the president's going to continue to make his case that House Republicans need to move forward. The speaker needs to put the national security supplemental on the floor. We know that it would get overwhelming support. And also, it's also about our national security, our own national security. And so we can't let politics get in the way of our national security. So the president's going to make that clear, and I'll just leave it to the president, as he would say, stay tuned for
Just
tomorrow.
to be clear, he'd make those points clear at the State of the Union.
He's going to continue to make that case clear. You asked me how he's going to do that or lay that out tomorrow in the State of the Union. I just don't want to get ahead of the president. But our message continues, right? As it relates to national security supplemental, obviously the Ukraine aid is included in that supplemental.
Justice Navalny also invited and couldn't attend.
So I talked about this yesterday. Mrs. Navalny was indeed invited personally by the president. She was not able to attend. I would refer you obviously to her to explain why. But yes, she was
Just
invited.
lastly, on the
Yes.
Russian missile strike, it was only about 200 feet away from President Zelensky. That's according to one of our sources. And a source close to Zelensky tells us that they believe Zelensky was the intended target. Is the U.S. looking into that strike? Do they believe that Zelensky was in fact the intended target?
So I can't speak to what they were targeting. That's not something that I can speak to, but it appears that it landed near, as you just said, the convoy. And I think Russia's actions speak for themselves here, but I can't speak for their exact target.
Karine, do you have any reaction to the sailors that were reportedly killed in the Houthi attack?
So let me say a couple things about that that happened earlier today. So today, the Houthis have killed innocent civilians by continuing their reckless attacks against international commercial shipping, which impacts countries throughout the world. The ship they attacked was a Barbados-flagged Liberian-owned bulk carrier. It was not a U.S. ship, contrary to what the Houthis claimed. These reckless attacks by the Iran-backed Houthis have not only disrupted global trade and commerce, but also taken the lives of international seafarers simply doing their jobs. We offer our condolences, obviously, to the families of those who lost their lives, and again condemn the Houthis for these attacks. And we will call on governments around the world to do the same and join us in bringing to a halt these appalling attacks.
Thanks. And then one more on Haiti. We understand that the Prime Minister, Henri, is located in the United States right now in Puerto Rico. Could you talk a little bit about what his status is there and what the United States is doing as far as his travel logistics?
So I cannot speak to the Prime Minister's travel. He would have to speak to it himself. I just cannot speak to that.
Okay. And then should we expect any policy, like detailed policy rollout associated with State of the Union tomorrow?
I don't have anything to share at this time. The president, I'm not going to get ahead of the president, certainly, as he would say, stay tuned, stay tuned. Okay.
Karine, did the president have any reaction to Dean Phillips suspending his presidential campaign?
I don't have any reaction. I would have to refer you to the campaign on that specific.
Can you tell us generally whether you know if the president thinks there's, legitimacy behind some of the main reasons that Phillips decided to run for president? Concerns about the president's age, concerns that he is a vulnerable general election candidate. Is that something you've ever spoken to him about?
So I'm going to be really careful. We're talking about an upcoming election, and obviously in November, so going to be really mindful. Look, this is why I think the State of the Union is going to be really important. The president's going to lay out what he has done the last 3 years, the successes that he's had, historic successes that he's had. He's going to speak to how he sees the future for this country on behalf of the American people. I think that's going to be important. And I would say this as it relates to part of your question. Look, the president has been very clear. He's been very honest about his age. He knows that. He makes jokes about it, right? He makes jokes about his friend Jimmy Madison, right? He gets that. But this is also a president that has gotten done more in the last 3 years than most presidents have in their 2 terms of presidency. And that is what we've seen from the data. And a lot of that is because of his experience. His experience matter. His experience as 36 years as a senator, 8 years as vice president, and now into his first term as president. It has shown that he can get things done. We see that with the economy. We see that what he's trying to do with lowering costs. We see what he's trying to do with lowering healthcare costs, and a lot of historic pieces of legislation that was done that are now law, obviously, that was done in a bipartisan way. And that's because of the president's experience. And I think that matters. And I'm just going to let the president speak more to his future, his vision, what he sees for this country tomorrow night.
Just a quick question on State of the Union. You know, there was obviously a universe where a ceasefire and hostages deal was reached before the State of the Union. It seems increasingly clear that that's not going to happen in the next 36 hours. So given that, can you give us a little bit of insight into how the president has been working to draft a speech that addresses and speaks to just the anger and frustration that a lot of people are feeling about the fact that he is not willing so far to call for a permanent ceasefire?
So look, as you've heard the president call for a ceasefire, a period of time, a pause where there's a period of time where obviously the fighting stops, right? And with that is a hostage deal where we can get these hostages back home to their family and their loved ones. Let's not forget, the hostages include about 6 Americans. And so that's incredibly important. At the same time, let's not forget getting that all important humanitarian aid into Gaza to the Palestinian people. And so that is important. That is a first step that we need to get to. The president's going to continue to work on this as he has been for the past several weeks, for the past several months, along with his team. So we are steadfast, focused on that. That is not going to change just because there's a State of the Union tomorrow. And so the president is going to be optimistic. He is. As it relates to his speech, look, these speeches, all of them, you know, they take massive undertaking, right? They take a lot of work, and to actually meet the moment of where we are as a country, and also lay out the future for this country. So not going to get into specifics as to how he's working through that. You'll hear it from him directly, but the president certainly is going to meet the moment where we are as a country, lay out the progress that we've seen in the last 3 years, and not just that, how do we build on that progress?
Do you happen to know what about the speech writing process this time around the president has found most challenging?
Look, this is his 3rd State of the Union address, as you know. This is going to be, as you can imagine, a very important, as he sees it, a conversation that he'll have with the American people. Millions of people are going to be watching. And so it's not just about the people who are the elected officials who are in front of him. And so, you know, I would say this. I would say this is certainly a continuation of those conversations that he has with the American people when he goes out, and travels on the road, right? He hears directly from them. He hears what they are dealing with. He deals with what their family is dealing with. And so it's built on that. It's built on those conversations, that experience that he has, and knowing and having his finger on the pulse is certainly about what the American people have been going through these past 3 years. Going to be really mindful, not going to dive into his thought process. I think when he delivers his speech tomorrow night, you'll get a good sense of where the president is and how he sees where we are at this country, the State of the Union, obviously, hence the opportunity that he has tomorrow. And so I would just leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks. After Nikki Haley withdrew this morning from the Republican presidential primary, President Biden issued a statement and a direct appeal to her voters. Does President Biden plan to reach out to Nikki Haley at some point, and has he yet, or has he yet?
That's for the campaign to speak to. I don't have anything on that for you. Okay, Mike.
Yesterday, I believe, Jake Sullivan announced that the administration backs a bipartisan bill that would lead to the banning of TikTok. Does Jake's views represent the views of the rest of the White House?
So just a couple of things, and I'll get to your comment about the banning, but I do want to say a couple of things at the top. The administration has worked with members of Congress from both parties to pursue a durable legislative solution that would address the threat posed by certain technology services operating in the United States that put at risk Americans' personal information and broader national security. And so what we see is this bill is important. We welcome this step on ongoing efforts to deal with that, to address that. And we appreciate the bipartisan work. I think that's important that this was done in a bipartisan way. And so we look forward to working with Congress. Obviously, we provided technical assistance as we normally do when pieces of legislations are like this are being put together. But I would have to say, we don't see this as banning these apps. That's not what this is. But by ensuring that their ownership isn't in the hands of those who may do us harm. This is about our national security, obviously, and this is what we're focused on here.
And the president would sign a bill. I mean, the bill explicitly gives the administration the authority to ban the apps if those ownership questions aren't resolved, and the president would sign it, right?
So we welcome the bill. We obviously are working with them, and we think.
Jake's words were to quickly act, urging Congress to act quickly to
Yep.
send it to the president's
And
desk.
that's what I was going to say. We welcome it. Obviously, we've been working with them on it, and we would want to see this bill get done so it can get to the president's
And
desk.
just final question: is the president planning on talking to TikTok influencers on Friday after the State of the Union about his speech?
That's a good question. I don't have anything for you on that on his schedule for tomorrow. Once we do, we certainly will share that.
Friday.
For Friday, pardon me, for Friday. As you know, he's going to be on the road on Friday. I don't have.
And if
anything.
he does, you wouldn't see any contradiction between the fact that the president would be using a technology that he's urging Congress to.
Here's the thing, and I've been asked this question multiple times about TikTok and our use of TikTok as it relates to the campaign. I know the campaign has created a TikTok account. I would let them speak to that. That is their strategy. Would let them speak to that. And we've said this before. We are going to try to meet the American people where they are. We are. I mean, we're trying to reach everyone. The president is the president for all Americans, and so that's what we're trying to do there. Doesn't
Even if it's a dangerous platform.
but it doesn't mean that we're not going to try to figure out how to protect our national security, right? That's what we're doing here. That's what you see in this bipartisan legislation that's being moved forward, that you heard from Jake about, that you're hearing from me about. Doesn't mean that we don't do the work to make sure that we protect Americans, and that's what we're going to do here. Okay.
Thanks, Shereen. My colleague reported that U.S. officials told members of Congress in a recent classified briefing that the U.S. has quietly approved and delivered more than 100 separate foreign military sales to Israel since the Gaza war began on October 7th. I'm wondering if the administration has any comment on just the scale of the amount of, or the White House has any comment on the scale of the amount that's been
I'm just not
transferred.
going to comment on that.
Whether the White House thinks that there should be more transparency
I-
around.
I'm not going to comment on reporting and what you heard. I'm just not going to comment on that. Okay, Jordan.
Thanks, Corinne. Just one more point of clarification on the TikTok stance. Are you saying that President Biden would sign the bill in its current form? Because the NSC statement said that you wanted to work with members of Congress to put it on stronger legal footing. So it sounds like he would not sign it in its current form.
We would need it to be worked on, right? As we have stated, we welcome the steps that they've taken. Obviously, it still needs some work. Obviously, we're providing technical support. And once it gets to a place where we think, to your point, it's on legal standing and it's in a place where it can get out of Congress, then the president would sign it. But we need to continue to work on it, obviously.
One more on the Houthi attack. Can you say if the U.S. is readjusting its military strategy against Houthis in response to this deadly incident? Is the U.S. going to step up attacks on Houthi positions in Yemen in response?
So look, the U.S. obviously is going to continue to take action. And we believe that, and I'm not going to get into national security here, we believe that what you have seen this administration do over the past several weeks. Okay.
Continuing on the Houthis, why is the U.S. Navy having so little effect on stopping these kinds of attacks from happening?
So as I was answering the question to Jordan a second ago, I'm not going to get into specific intelligence here, but broadly speaking, we know that the strikes have indeed impacted on degrading their capabilities, and that's important. We have taken out significant amount of Houthi weapons, and our military is regularly destroying Houthi missiles, and when they're being loaded and prepared to launch, but before they can actually be fired at commercial ships. So that's what we've been able to do. So we will continue to act as needed to degrade the Houthis' capabilities, and this is a process. This is a process here.
Does the U.S. Still hold Iran responsible for these attacks?
It hasn't changed. Our stance on that has not changed.
And what would happen if the Houthis hit a U.S. naval ship?
You've seen us respond when you saw 3 military members were killed not too long ago. You saw our response. So the president is also the commander in chief, as you know, and he understands that responsibility.
Just to find out one thing on Haiti about the prime minister being in Puerto Rico, just to clarify, he's there on his own volition, or is the United States providing aid and comfort?
So we are not providing any assistance to help the prime minister certainly return to Haiti. We're not going to speak to his travel. That is something for him to speak to.
As far as you know, he's just enjoying the sights.
That's for him. That's one way to put it. That's for him to speak to. All right.
Green, is the president preparing for hecklers during the State of the Union?
Look, you saw the president last year when some Republican members behaved in a way that was, I would say, disrespectful, and he handled that, and that he did that on his own, and he held them to account as it related to important programs that matter to the American people, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. He called them out on it as they were obviously heckling at him. And so the president's ready for anything. He's ready for anything. As you saw him literally do that last year. And, it was something to watch. You all reported on that.
During speech preparations, is he prepping for drilling?
Look, the president knows how to handle this stuff. I mean, again, he did it literally last February of 2023, and nobody was expecting that. And he took them on and laid out and fought for the American people on programs that matter to them. And so he got this. The president's got this.
Given that House Speaker Mike Johnson has invited and is hosting the parents of Evan Gershkovich, what is the White House's reaction to that, given his role in stalling the national security bill? Do you think? What does the White House think about his invitation to Gershkovich's parents?
As it relates to the national security supplemental and the speaker refusing to put it on the floor so that it can get overwhelming support, as we know it's going to get, and it will work towards our national security. Right, it'll protect the American people, national security. That's how we feel. The speaker should actually put the bill on the floor that we know Republicans are going to vote for it. Obviously, Democrats are going to vote for it. Overwhelming support. If he cares about our national security and put politics aside, he should do that.
I ask because the White House has said before that the speaker, by stalling the national security bill, he's giving aid to Russia, and now he's invited.
I mean, that still stands. I mean, I was just asked by one of your colleagues about the convoy, right, where President Zelensky was and the attack that happened near his convoy. We know what Russia is up to. We've seen what has been happening on the battlefield over the past several weeks because of Congress's inaction. And so we've been really clear. When the big four were here just last week, the CIA director was in the room and he laid out the dire consequences for Ukraine. Look, we have to stand up for, just like the brave Ukrainians are standing up for democracy, we have to do the same. It also speaks to our own national security. So the speaker needs to put that national security supplemental on the floor and let it get that overwhelming support, bipartisan support that we know that it's going to get.
And finally, just to button something up on Haiti, yesterday Admiral Kirby said that it was a simplistic explanation that there was, money being held up when it comes to this multinational security force, that Republicans were holding up some of this money. He said that there are other reasons for it, but I'll ask the question more bluntly. Do you blame Republicans for holding up critical money for Haiti?
So let's not forget what we're providing to Haiti is really important emergency needs, right? When we think about food, healthcare, clean water, and other forms of critical assistance through UN and NGO partners to help people in need across Haiti. And so what we are seeing and what everyone is actually realizing is that the deteriorating situation in Haiti has required organizations to adjust their posture and at times prevented aid from reaching people in need. And that is just because of what we're seeing, obviously, on the ground. And so humanitarian partners are going to continue to provide the assistance amidst the current security breakdown, obviously, the best way that they can. But as we know, there's a dire situation on the ground. It has made it very difficult to get that aid. And we have said this before, the U.S. government has been leading in providing aid to the Haitian people. Okay.
On the State of the Union tomorrow, how much of it can we expect to be forward-looking, potentially presenting a vision for a second term versus going over kind of the accomplishments of the first term?
So I don't have a formula to read out to you right now. What I can say is he's going to take a look back, as I said at the top, look at the achievements and the successes that we have had the last 3 years, and also speak to how we're going to continue to build on those successes and fight for the CHIPS Act, fight for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is, as we know, at least as it relates to the Inflation Reduction Act, Republicans have tried to claw back. And these are important pieces of legislation that we need to continue to implement and protect. So you're going to hear him talk about that. I've talked about other things that the president wants to focus on, lowering costs, fighting for our democracy, fighting for reproductive rights. So he's going to talk about that, talk about the future, talk about his vision for the American people. He's an optimistic guy, as we know, but I don't have a formulation on percentages or how that's going to be divvied up, but that's what you can expect to hear from the president.
And is the administration still debating taking executive action on immigration?
I mean, we've been clear about this. The bottom line is the best way to have moved forward on dealing with immigration, dealing with the border challenges that we're seeing, was for Republicans to have gotten out of the way, not let the former president tell them what to do, and actually move forward with a bipartisan proposal that came out of the Senate. That would have been the toughest, the fairest way to have moved forward with dealing with our immigration. As it relates to an executive action, that we believe that's the best way to do that. No executive action would have been able to have the impact that bipartisan proposal would have had. We're always going to look at and evaluate everything, but we just have not made a decision on that.
Is there a timeline for when that decision will be made?
Don't have a timeline for you. Again, the best way to move forward to deal with this broken immigration system that has been broken for decades, the best way to move forward with the challenges at the border is to get this bipartisan proposal moved forward. Go ahead, Nadia.
Thank you, Karine. Since you don't have a comment on the Washington Post story, I hope you have an answer for my question. A group of House Democrats sent a letter to the president saying basically that an Israeli invasion of Rafah will be in violation of U.S. law and international law when it comes to weapon sales to Israel. So do you think that Israel has been abiding by the U.S. law, despite the fact that 70% of the people being killed are women and children?
So I've heard about the reporting of the letter, so I don't want to. I haven't seen the letter, so I can't speak specifically to it. No. But I'll give you an answer that I think will address your question. So look, as you all know, we have supported Israel as they defend themselves against Hamas, a terrorist organization. As you know, that has been the policy here. We also continue to urge Israel to do everything possible to avoid civilian casualties. And even as Hamas has embedded, let's not forget, they've embedded, and I know you know this, itself among civilian population. That is something that they have done. As we have said, there have been far too many civilians who have been killed in this conflict, far too many. And the president understands that. The vice president understands that. This entire administration understands that. And there's not enough humanitarian aid getting in. We need to increase humanitarian aid. And you've heard that again from the president. You've heard that from the vice president. And so that's why we're working so hard to get that hostage deal. As we know, that would lead to a ceasefire where the fighting would stop. We can get those hostages home to their families. We can get that all needed humanitarian aid to the people of the people in Gaza, which need it, obviously need that critical aid. And we're continuing to do what we can, right? The airdrops that were successful. We announced that yesterday. There's more coming from the Department of Defense. The USAID is in the region providing humanitarian aid. We're working with our regional partners to get more humanitarian aid in, and so we have to up that obviously the humanitarian aid, but this deal is so important. We have to get this deal so we can get more aid in, but not just that. Put a pause, have a ceasefire in place so that we can actually move forward here.
For a colleague, will the president meet with the Prime Minister of Sweden tomorrow? He's on his way here. Will he be a guest at the State of the Union? And will the president, I know you don't want to speak ahead of the speech, but will he talk about Ukraine and the success of the administration bringing Finland and Sweden into NATO?
So I'm going to be really mindful. I'm not going to speak to the president's speech here in detail. And so going to be really mindful. I don't have anything to read out on the meeting there with the president. I believe the Secretary of State is having a meeting with the Sweden Prime Minister. So obviously you can reach out to them. Just don't have anything else to share beyond that. Good, Danny.
Thanks, Karine. On Haiti, given the dire situation there, is there any consideration of sending U.S. forces in any way to stabilize things there?
No. As you know, there is the Kenyan has agreed to send about 2,000 forces there. So that was recently signed, and that's going to move forward. But there is no plan to bring U.S. forces into Haiti.
Also on Haiti, earlier you said that the administration is not pushing Henry to resign. Are you denying that yesterday the administration asked Henry to stand aside for a transitional government and an interim prime minister?
What I can say is we're not pushing the prime minister to resign. We're just not. Now, have we been working with CARICOM? Have we been working with our Haitian partners to put forth a plan to figure out how do we move forward in restoring democratic order in Haiti through free and fair elections? That is a conversation that we have had, but we are not pushing the prime minister out to resign.
Asked him to stand aside.
We are not pushing. I think I just answered that question. We are not pushing him to resign.
Thank you, Karine. New topic.
I wonder what it is.
Has President Biden called to congratulate Jason Palmer?
We congratulate Jason Palmer on his win last night.
Now that the field is down to 2, is President Biden going to commit to a debate with Donald Trump?
That's something for the campaign to speak to.
Well, we know when the debates are going to be. We know where they're going to be. Is he going to go?
You should speak to the campaign.
In 2020, once it got down to one-on-one, Joe Biden said, "I can hardly wait to debate him." How about now?
I'm going to sound like a broken record. You should reach out to the campaign.
Why is this a campaign thing?
Because it's an election. It's a debate for the 2024 presidential election.
I'm not asking what argument he is going to make at a debate. I'm just asking.
It's not an art. We're not talking about arguments. You're talking about his attendance.
You
You
get a
need to
lot of
talk to the
questions in
campaign.
here about these polls concerning the president's age and his acuity. Do you think that it is going to quiet concerns about the president's age and acuity if he decides not to debate?
What I can say about that is not talking about the debate. That's something for the campaign to speak to. Not going to speak about that. To your question about age, I think I sort of answered that. I mean, you're going to see the State of the Union tomorrow. You're going to hear the president lay out his plans. You're going to hear a president who has had a successful 3 years of progress. Still a lot more work to be done, but a progress nonetheless, and how he's going to build on that. Bless you. Did you say something? Well,
No, I-
okay. um, some fun here on Wednesday afternoon, but he wouldn't have been able to get. It's all seriousness. You saw the graphics behind me. You saw what the president has been able to do. 14.8 million jobs, unemployment under 4%, continuing to find ways to lower costs. We saw that when he made the announcement on junk fees. You saw what he's been able to do for the American people internationally as well, protecting our national security, being a leader as we're trying to fight a dictator, as Ukraine is fighting a dictator, that is Mr. Putin. And this is because of the president's leadership. It really is. I mean, 36 years in the Senate, 8 years as vice president, that counts for something. That counts for experience. That counts for having these relationships. That counts for knowing how to get things done. And the president wants to build on that. He does. And not only that, when people were saying he couldn't get things done in a bipartisan way, he was able to do that. Infrastructure, it was a punchline in the last administration. It was a joke. Now we actually have an infrastructure decade. You think about what we've been able to do for our veterans in the PACT Act, really help our veterans. You think about the Chips and Science Act, which is bringing home manufacturing. 800,000 jobs have been created. This is what the president's been able to do. And guess what? That's because of his experience.
And so just for clarity, it's possible that there will be no Joe Biden, Donald Trump debates.
Is
this
that what
fall.
is that what you're excited about? Is that what you want to see?
I would
Because you
love to
keep
see
asking
Joe
me. You've
Biden
asked
and
me
Donald
about
Trump
3,
debate.
4, or 5 different times in different ways.
How
And I
would
have
you do-
and
how
I've
would
said
President Biden do in a debate? I'm not asking a question about a specific debate. I'm
Can
just
I-
asking how would
okay,
he do in a
can I
debate? I
just
know
say
it's been 4
something?
years since
You
he's done.
literally saw just last year, back in January 2023, at the last State of the Union, take on Republicans during giving a major speech. He took them on as they were heckling him. He took them on and said he was going to fight for programs, essentially said he was fighting for programs that the American people needed. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. He stood there and fought for the American people. I mean, that was pretty impressive. Some of you all reported on that. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Go ahead, Phil, in the back.
Thank you. Victoria Nuland, the third highest ranking U.S. diplomat who's had a hand in the future of Ukraine for some time, announced that she plans to step down. How did the president react to news of that resignation, and does he believe, that she was successful during her tenure there?
So I have not spoken to the president about this, so I can't give you an answer directly from the president. And so I'm just going to leave that there. Obviously, it's an important position. We appreciate her service. It is not easy to serve, as you know, and we appreciate her service. I just don't want to get into any specifics on that. I don't have anything to share.
Then, what's the president's reaction to France codifying abortion rights into their constitution?
So we appreciate countries taking a step forward to protect the right for women to make a very difficult decisions on their health care. We appreciate that. I think that's a good thing to see. And as it relates to here in this country, the president's going to talk about reproductive rights and fighting for that. And what we're seeing across the country, more than 300 bills that were introduced recently on finding ways to prevent women from making these really important decisions on their bodies. And that should not be. And that's because Roe v. Wade was overturned, which is a law that was part of the Constitution for almost 50 years, and that was taken away. We see Republicans putting forth 3 national bans against abortion. That's not what the president's fighting for. He's fighting for the right for a woman to make a decision on her own body.
And does he think that the French prohibition on abortion after 14 weeks is reasonable?
And look, I'm not going to get into the specifics of that particular bill. What I could say, it's always important to see other countries actually take steps to protecting rights, fundamental rights that women should have. But I'm not going to get into the specifics of the bill. Go ahead, Karen.
Ms. Crane, can you give us some insight into the president's State of the Union prep sessions at Camp David? Who was he working with on the speech, and what does he do? I mean, is he writing lines or is he editing what's given to him? What's that process like for him?
So look, as it relates to Camp David, obviously the president was at Camp David over the weekend. He worked on his speech, on the State of the Union speech, with his senior staff, which included Bruce Reed, Anita Dunn, Steve Ricchetti, and Vinay Reddy. This is fairly standard. He was there last year for the February State of the Union, and I think even throughout today and tomorrow, he's going to continue to fine tune the speech. This is something that he is personally involved in. This is something that comes straight from having conversations with the American people, as he's had over the past year, leading to this, certainly leading to the process. And so, look, there are massive undertakings, right? Massive undertakings in having a State of the Union that speaks to where we are as a country and how we're moving forward. And so that's what I'll say.
And does he have any State of the Union traditions? Like, is there something he does tomorrow to prepare for a speech like that?
So I don't have anything to share. I can say that he's going to be working on the speech throughout the day, fine tuning the speech. He'll be doing that with his senior staff. And it's a major address. It's an important speech. He's going to be delivering it to millions of Americans who are going to be tuning in. And we appreciate that in front of obviously Congress and guests of Congress, guests of the president. And it's going to be an incredibly important moment. And the president takes that very, very seriously. Go ahead, Karen.
Thanks, Corinne. A federal judge in Texas ruled that the Minority Business Development Agency's presumption that Black and Brown communities are disadvantaged is unconstitutional and enjoined the agency from distributing its services based on race. Is the White House concerned that this ruling could undo some of the efforts that you've been making to bolster Black businesses?
So look, I'm going to refer you to the DOJ for specific questions about this particular ruling. But what I can say that the president is very proud of the bipartisan infrastructure law that made the MBDA a permanent part of the federal government. He's very proud of that. It's important. Small businesses, as you know, are the backbone of our economy. And so it's vital. It's vital for our entrepreneurs to have the opportunity
One, in his victory speech, he thanked Black voters for their outsized role in his historic win. He said that he would have their backs. Obviously, polling and anecdotal reporting shows that a significant number of Black voters still feel that the president hasn't completely had their backs or have not felt the impacts of this administration's policies. How much of this speech does the president see as an opportunity to lay out what he believes he has done to have the backs of Black Americans?
So look, we understand that it's complicated, right? In the sense of what the American people have gone through the last 3 years. We came in, there was a pandemic, and there was an economy that was in a tailspin. So we get it. We get that some Americans are trying to still figure out where we are and what's going on and what this administration has done. This is why the State of the Union is going to be so critical, so important, because the president gets to lay that out. It gives the president an opportunity to speak to that. And so that's important. But to the beginning of your question about 2020 and the promise that the president has made, he did make a promise, and he has done everything that he can to keep that promise. You think about voting rights. The first couple of days of this administration, he put forward an executive action to do everything that he could on the federal level to deal with that issue. So he did that. He took executive action when Congress could not move on the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. You know that, you covered that. He took actions from where he could from here, from the federal government. And so, look, there are other ways that he has taken action, obviously, to make sure that communities that have felt that that felt left behind are not left behind. And you see that in for example, every economic policy that he's moved forward with, whether it's the bipartisan infrastructure legislation, whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act that really deals with making sure that Medicare has the ability to fight big pharma, right? So that many people in the community who've been paying hundreds of dollars for insulin, for example, now seniors are capped by $35. These things matter. These things add up. These things are important. And so he takes that very seriously. When he walked into the administration, unemployment for the Black community, for example, was over 9%. Now it's at 5%. That's because of the work that this administration has taken. Think about the American Rescue Plan, the child tax credit really cut child poverty in the community by half. That's because obviously the work that this president has done. That piece of legislation, only Democrats voted for it. So the president's taken action. We understand that it's complicated. It's going to take some time for everyone to see what this president has been able to do. The State of the Union is a perfect opportunity to lay that out. Go ahead, Janie.
Thank you very much. I have a question about China. The President Biden signed an order of action which prohibits enemies from stealing American personal or government information. And there is a list of 6 countries, including China and North Korea. My question is, how is the investigation into the Confucius Institute, which is acting as China's intelligence agency, processing in the United States?
So say that one. So the president signed. Say that one more time.
The president signed the order of action for the enemies, steal the enemies, U.S. information. But there's a list of 6 countries, including China and North Korea, whatever, Iran, or 6 countries.
Yeah.
So how is the investigation into the Confucius Institute, which is acting as China's intelligence agency, processing in the United States and all of the world, and Korea also too?
Yeah, that's something as it relates to any investigation. That's something that the Department of Justice could go into. I'm not going to go into it from here. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, no problem. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you. When the president speaks tomorrow night, you said he's going to talk about his efforts to bolster democracy. Is he going to have a message for people viewing this in other countries and U.S. allies? Because I'm looking at some polling data from the UK. It says that 48% of British adults see the West's response to Putin and Russia getting worse if the president loses re-election. Over half, 52%, say that if the president loses re-election, the West's approach to climate change would worsen. Is he going to try and reassure people around the world that democracy is strong and project strength that he can win the election?
So going to be careful because you're asking me this question as it relates to the election and upcoming elections. Going to be super. No, wait. Every time I say that, everyone gets a little upset that I say that. But I'm going to try and answer your question. But I just have to be super mindful here. I mean, that's just how it works here. I'm a federal employee. There's something called the Hatch Act. Got to be mindful. And so, look, I talked about how the president's going to mention the national security supplemental and how important it is, as certainly because we've seen what's going on in Ukraine, right? And one of the things that we know and we believe, and this is something that I had mentioned that the CIA director shared with the Big Four, is that we see that Ukraine is losing ground on in the battlefield right now, and we believe it's because of Congress's inaction, right? And so it does matter. It does matter if we take action or not. It does matter that if we get this national security supplemental done or not. It does. Other countries look at what we're doing. The president has led the way in bringing NATO together, led the way in bringing other countries, 50 countries plus together on making sure that the brave people of Ukraine have what they need, the security assistance that they need to fight against Russia's aggression. So yeah, it does matter. It does matter how we move forward. I'm not going to get specifics into the president's speech. I think that's important. I got to let the president speak to that. You heard me at the top talk about the importance of democracy, talking about unifying the American people. The president thinks that's really important. Protecting our fundamental freedoms and our democracy itself is incredibly important. So look, and let's not forget here what many Americans have been going through, right? The attacks that they have seen, the threats that they have seen. So there is an important message that the president wants to send to the American people about that as well. And so, but to your broader point of your question, does our actions and how we, for example, deal with Ukraine and make sure they have the assistance that they have, the inaction of Congress, does that matter? Yes, it matters. I mean, Putin continues to move forward, right? And we have seen what the battlefield has looked like for Ukraine. They have lost ground because Congress has had inaction. So it does matter. It does matter. I'm not going to get into specifics as to what the president's going to say.
On Haiti, the Haitian prime minister is in Puerto Rico. Obviously, yesterday, the vice president's office said that she will be in Puerto Rico later this month. Any chance that she could be asked to meet with the prime minister and perhaps pass a message?
Look, you would have to certainly speak to her office about her travel and where she's going to be. We've been very clear. We've been very clear dealing with our what our message has been, essentially, right? Dealing with for some time now with CARICOM, our Haitian partners, how we see the path forward, and that is restoring democratic order in Haiti through free and fair elections. That's been our message. Inclusive governance and power sharing. That's what we want to see, and we want to give the people in Haiti, we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to democratically elect their prime minister. That's what we want to see. And I will leave it there. Thanks, everybody.
pushing for him to resign, but we are urging him to expedite the transition to an empowered and inclusive governance structure that will move with urgency to help the country prepare for a multinational security support mission to address the security situation and pave the way for free and fair elections.
Okay, so what's your understanding of where he is now and his efforts to get back to the country?
So I will let him speak to his travel plans and his location.
All right. Well, look, the U.S. has a long and very difficult history with Haiti, and going back long before you or I were born, decades and decades and decades. But also in my time at the State Department, I was there when you guys organized the quote unquote evacuation of Prime Minister. So how far are you guys prepared to go in pushing or telling Prime Minister Henry that he needs to either start the transition or get out of the way so that the transition can start?
So we are going to continue to work with CARICOM. I think it's important to make clear that it's not the United States acting alone in this with this regard. It's the United States in consultation with partners in the region are having these conversations. And what we are saying to the Prime Minister is that he needs to expedite the transition to an empowered and inclusive governance, including the appointment of a transition council. So that's what we'll continue to discuss with him.
If anyone else has anything on Haiti,
Yeah.
I know you're not confirming his whereabouts, but is he welcome in the United States? I mean, can Prime Minister Henry stay in the United States, in U.S. territory?
I'm just not going to speak to his travel plans at all. I think it's appropriate for him to make those announcements.
And also, I mean, could you flesh it out a little bit more to a new governance structure? Is there something concrete that's in mind? I mean, there's obviously ideas from CARICOM and elsewhere, but is there sort of a concrete plan, or is this more just generally speaking that something needs to change?
I don't want to speak to it in detail from here because it's something we're in conversation with partners in the region about at this time. But we have always been clear that there needs to be a transition to free and fair elections in Haiti, and we have been clear that we need to see the deployment of a multinational security support mission to address the dire security situation on the ground. So we are continuing to work through both of those things. We are making progress on deploying
the first fatalities. Do you have anything to say about this incident?
I think that it was sadly inevitable. The Houthis have continued to launch these reckless attacks with no regard for the well-being of innocent civilians who are transiting through the Red Sea. And now they have unfortunately and tragically killed innocent civilians. And so the United States will continue to hold the Houthis accountable for their attacks, which have not just disrupted international commerce, not just disrupted the freedom of navigation in international waters, and not just endangered seafarers, but now tragically killed a number of them. So we will continue to hold them accountable, and we call on governments around the world to do the same. Anything else?
So I'll let other people go on Gaza.
Just a little bit.
Just
Just one more thing. on
I'm
Houthi.
so weird.
So
Like the two of you
collaborative.
guys like collaborating or maybe
not?
conspiring.
Right. When you say we'll continue to hold the Houthis accountable for their attacks, should we expect like a new wave of U.S. retaliatory attacks from here in a way that we've seen 3 weeks ago, or what exactly? are you referring to?
I'm not going to preview actions that we will take from this podium, as is always the case.
Okay, I'll go to Gaza in that case.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Just quickly one more. We're being very polite about things. I mean, just the flip side of what Humar asked. I mean, does this show a failure, for lack of another term, of deterrence? I mean, there have been these strikes from the U.S. and UK and others on Houthi targets. Does it show it's not working and that there needs to be a new strategy?
Look, we have always made clear that this is going to be a long-term process, both to deter the Houthi attacks and to degrade their capabilities to carry them out. And that's a process that is continuing. At the same time, we continue to talk to partners in the region about how they ought to make clear to the Houthis that these attacks are irresponsible, that they endanger international commerce, and that they hurt the economies of countries in the region as well as countries around the world. So it's something that we will continue to push, not just on behalf of the United States, but on behalf of the coalition that we have assembled to oppose the Houthis' actions and again, to collaborate with other countries in the world who share those interests.
Go ahead.
Okay, on Gaza ceasefire, Matt, yesterday you said that U.S. believes that the obstacles at the moment are not insurmountable. how would you describe the talks today, given that there's still no breakthrough and it's day 3 and it's at a very critical week?
So I'm not going to give a day-by-day assessment of the talks, but the
Doesn't
overall
day by
but
day.
the overall assessment that I offered yesterday has not stand. We continue to believe that the obstacles are not insurmountable and that a deal can be reached, and a deal is in the interest of Israel, it's in the interest of the Palestinian people, and it's in the interest of the broader region. So we're going to continue to push for one, but I'm not going to offer an assessment of where things stand today.
So you wouldn't describe the talks as they're at an impasse?
They are ongoing. No.
Right. And what is the U.S. understanding that the biggest sticking point is at the moment?
Nice try, but I'm not going to answer that one.
And would you say that it is right now up to Hamas or Israel or both of them, which one, to basically accept the deal? Or it's not like that, it is something that they have to...
So it is a negotiation. It's an ongoing process, but the point that you have heard me make and that you've heard the secretary and other leaders of the administration make over the past few days is that Israel put a serious proposal on the table, and it's for Hamas to accept it. It's also for Hamas to engage in good faith and show that they actually want to get a deal. And we're going to continue to engage on good faith on our behalf and continue to try to get a deal over the finish line.
Have you seen in recent days that Hamas is not engaging in good faith?
So
they actually don't want the deal?
So I think that it's hard to ever offer an assessment that a terrorist organization that attacks innocent civilians is acting wholly in good faith, but it is a negotiation, and I don't want to comment on the underlying negotiation. Go ahead, Tom. I'll come to you next slide.
The World Health Organization said yesterday that its officials had visited Shifa Hospital, where there was the treatment of 50 children suffering from severe acute malnutrition. In Kamal Adwan Hospital, 10 children had reportedly died from hunger and dehydration in recent days, and that it was overwhelmed by patients. They say the current rate of 15% of wasting among children under the age of 2 in northern Gaza suggests a serious and rapid decline. Such a decline in a population's nutritional status in 3 months is unprecedented globally. About this situation. So what is being done to alleviate this?
So first of all, let me say that those reports, which we saw and reviewed, are obviously heartbreaking. And it confirms what you heard the secretary say yesterday, that not only is the situation on the ground right now in Gaza unacceptable, but it's unsustainable. It cannot continue this way. And so you have seen the United States take action to airdrop food supplies in. You have seen us take action to fund the delivery of humanitarian assistance. You have seen us announce that we are exploring a maritime option to deliver humanitarian assistance through new routes, but it still is incumbent upon the government of Israel to do more as well. Now, we did see an increase in the number of trucks that went into Israel yesterday. Around 250, 260 trucks made it in through Rafah and Kerem Shalom. That's an improvement over where we have been. We have seen some improvement in the distribution, but we need to see dramatically more go in. We need to see it go in not just through Rafah and Kerem Shalom, but we need to see it go in through a crossing in the north. And we have made very clear to the government of Israel that's what we expect, and that we expect to see improvement. And as the president said, there can be no excuses.
And he said that on Friday. The vice president's repeated it. We heard from the Secretary of State yesterday a similar message, insisting that Israel facilitates more aid. And yet, yesterday, 14 World Food Programme trucks were blocked by the Israelis going into the north of Gaza. So they're not listening.
So I can't speak to that specific report of trucks being blocked. Sometimes trucks are blocked for legitimate reasons. Sometimes they're blocked for less than legitimate reasons. We want to see trucks move all around. There needs to be a security situation that allows them to move. And that's one of the difficult things that we have tried to work through. So what I'll say is the messages that you ticked through, that you heard the president and the vice president and the secretary deliver publicly, I can assure you that we are delivering those messages every bit as clearly, privately with Israel as well, and we expect to see action.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Just to follow up on Tom's referencing of the hospitals. I mean, of Gaza's 33 hospitals before that were fully operational before, say, October 7, there are now 3 that are semi-functional and so on. It's creating a really horrific situation. Now we talk about the food and the starvation and so on. But is there any way, I don't have any ideas, but is there any way to actually make these hospitals more functional and able to care for more people, especially children?
So the best way to achieve that goal, which is very much a goal that we have, would be to reach a deal for an immediate ceasefire that would last for at least 6 weeks
Right.
and would allow for a cessation in hostilities, would allow for the delivery of humanitarian assistance, would allow for people inside Gaza to move around, both doctors and patients and those who just need to seek medical care. That would be the best route to reach that objective, and it's one that we are continuing to pursue.
Mhm. So, 6 weeks would probably be a nice respite for the people and for everybody involved, but it also presumes that the fighting will continue thereafter for whatever reason after the end of the 6 weeks, especially, in light of what you alluded to yesterday, that you support Israel in its pursuit of the defeat of Hamas and so on. And what we see 150 days after this war began, we see that the fighting is still going. Hamas is not defeated by the best analysis. It has been degraded somewhat, maybe 30%, 20%, whatever it is. So conceivably, this war can go on for another year.
So we have always said that we want to see this conflict end as soon as possible. We want to get a temporary ceasefire to alleviate of Gaza and the demilitarization of Hamas. And it's something that we will consult with, that we have been consulting and will continue to consult with partners in the region about, because for all that Israel has done in this conflict and all it has done to bring Hamas terrorists to justice, Hamas does bear a lot of responsibility for the conflict ongoing. So if we are able to get a ceasefire, it is very much something that we will pursue.
I understand, but you're saying that you want Hamas to surrender. That is, I mean, they're really serious thinking that this is actually going to happen. I mean, considering that the Palestinians have been waging some sort of, an armed struggle against Israel for the past 75 years. I mean, they go from Beirut to Lebanon to Jordan to places like this, but it goes on in the West Bank and so on. Is there really expectation that the Palestinians will give up the notion of getting their rights or getting their rights in the absence of the world doing anything about granting them their rights, that they have to do it on their own?
So we do not want the Palestinians to give up their rights. In fact, you have seen the secretary and the president pushing very hard for a two-state solution that would create an independent Palestinian state and would answer the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people. But to this question about Hamas, when you've seen 30,000 Palestinians killed, why wouldn't they lay down their arms and stop that bloodshed? Why wouldn't they lay down their arms and stop the war? If they truly care about the thousands and thousands of civilians who have been killed in a war that Hamas started. So remember who started this war. If that was in their real interest, the well-being of the Palestinian people, I'm hard-pressed to answer why they wouldn't lay down their arms and pursue a demilitarization option when you have the United States and other countries in the region saying, we are prepared to step forward and work on a legitimate political path forward for the Palestinian people. Not one that's brought about by terrorism, not one that's brought about by violence, but a legitimate political path that leads to an independent Palestinian state.
Lastly, I'm sorry, but just to push this point a bit further, the Palestinians basically said, okay, we lay down our arms. They've done it time and time again. They recognized Israel. They signed treaties
Hamas
and so on with them. Hamas said they will abide by let's not,
Hamas won't even sign up to the principles of the PLO. So.
But I'm saying that what we're saying is there has been a Palestinian effort that has failed. I mean, people look, whether it's Hamas or somebody else, they look at 30 years of efforts to arrive at the resolution that the United States has signed to, and in fact sponsored in 1993. And it has gone nowhere. We see the settlements expand. We see the occupation become more violent against the Palestinians. People are more imprisoned and so on.
So if people continue to look at the past and only the past that has happened for decades and decades, without being willing to sign on to a positive vision of the future, we will never have a peaceful way out of this conflict. Not just the current conflict in Gaza, but an actual resolution to the long-standing conflict between Israel and Palestinians.
But the problem with that, Matt, is that you have called for in every single conflict around the world there to be accountability for things that have happened in the past. And now you're saying, oh, well, just forget about it.
No, that's not. My point is there has to be at some point a political reconciliation. And so I think Saeed's point was, why would Hamas agree to lay down arms when we have seen grievance after grievance go on for decades? And the point that we have made, and you've heard this, the secretary speak to this a number of times.
Fair enough,
ultimately, there are two paths. You can continue down this path where we talk about what happened decades and decades ago and try to address that through violent activities, or we can have a peaceful resolution to this. And of course, you can. And when I say, of course, there's a process for addressing legitimate grievances through that process. But what I'm saying, and the point that we have made, is continuing to carry out violence as the solution to decades-old grievances is a path to continued conflict and a never-ending cycle that does not advance the interests of the Palestinian
But
people.
you're talking about addressing legitimate grievances from the past, right?
Yes, and my point is through violence will just lead you in this never-ending cycle that the region has been in for decades.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah,
I mean, because you said that why wouldn't Hamas look at the numbers of dead, 30,000, and effectively surrender? But that almost suggests or implies that the numbers killed creates a political or military pressure on Hamas to do so. But you've always said that, you know, any civilian death is unacceptable.
That's not my implication. That's not my implication at all. Any civilian death is unacceptable.
But you can link those two issues. But a Hamas surrender.
Côté que tu gagnes, ouais, ensemble avec Haïti, une débat déjà, donc il n'est pas nécessaire pour nous quitter toute les conférences là. Et fini, bien content, et majorité de monde qui était en bas live là, donc c'est des gens qui comprennent anglais, donc ils entendent ça qui dit, mais en résumé, que ce soit les Pot Pawol et Mezon Blanch, Karine Jean-Pierre, et que ce soit Mathieu Miller, donc pour Département d'État, il dit, il n'a pas demandé Ariel Henry pour les bails d'émission, mais il a demandé pour l'entreprendre processus pour assurer une transition. Donc, son langage diplomatique, exactement pas presque même ça, et Miami donc, te dit, il a pas demandé donc bail d'émission, c'est assurer qu'il y a une transition qui est faite. Et nous, te dit ça dans live, nous te fait matin, pour te gagner et en pile pression qui t'a faite sur M. Henry, en pile conférence, en pile réunion faite de telle sorte que yo capable d'essayer joindre donc M. Henry donc les bail d'émission et Miami Herald il t'a rapporté ça, nous te dit ça matin, nous t'ai écrit plusieurs articles sur une base sur lui, département de l'État États-Unis, donc t'es gagnant commencé à gagner une grosse frustration par rapport avec le Premier ministre Ariel Henry et M. Poté, tête li et Bayo. Donc, il a expliqué qu'il n'a pas demandé M. pour le changer, pour le démissionner, mais il a demandé l'entreprendre un processus qui pour faciliter donc en transition présidentielle. Donc, comprenez bien, donc en transition présidentielle qui gagne un président dans tête li. Yo et pas de voulait répondre sur est-ce que c'est sous compte États-Unis lié dans Porto Rico, ni Mathieu Miller pas de répondre, ni Karine Jean-Pierre. Donc, Karine Jean-Pierre, il pas de répondre. Il dit, donc, s'arrêter avec le Premier ministre pour les bail et pour le bail explication pour contre lui, mais c'est pas eux même. Ils ont demandé, journaliste, ils ont demandé, est-ce qu'il y a bail et il y a bail Premier ministre la possibilité, donc, pour le tourner à Haïti. Ils n'ont pas voulu répondre question ça tout. Faut que nous dit, tu gagné une réunion, donc, l'ONU jeudi, qui était faite côté Linda Thomas Greenfield était là-dedans. Donc, Linda Thomas Greenfield, c'est représentant États-Unis dans les Nations Unies. Tu as gagné un représentant CARICOM qui a mené un débat pour comment tu es capable de faciliter une sorte de transition. Donc, pour tu gagner l'autre premier ministre, son président. Et jusqu'à présent, on a cherché information sur ça. Et on nous dit, nous allons gagner. Fallait comme ça à 4h, on a annoncé pour 5h, mais c'est à 4h, finalement, de changer. Et ancien ambassadeur Daniel Foot, nous connaissons, qui t'a poussé en pile pour joindre des missions à Ariel Henry, surtout les mêmes qui étaient pas des missions, et ça a gagné plus passé 2 ans, côté il était dénoncé, et politique américain, il a même mené ici en Haïti, dans la question Haïti. Donc, nous allons gagner, et monsieur ensemble avec nous, Daniel Foot, et qui pral ba nous une petite mise en contexte sur débat discussion yo et demain nous en capable gagner en tout dit capable gagner yon et représentant CARICOM donc qui est impliqué dans la discussion yo pral ba nous des explications sur et qui genre discussion Europe mené qui ça qui gagne est-ce que Ariel Henry donc lui-même l'a tourné et Haïti ou bien l'a tourné comme premier ministre et en Haïti ou bien est-ce qu'il y a gagné un président mettait ensemble avec lui ça qui presque sûr hein, Ariel Henry pas pour contre lui s'il t'a prêté donc a bon président et nous pas certain que c'est lui-même qui a mené transition ça comme président encore moins comme premier ministre donc nous déjà fait toute diligence ensemble avec ancien ambassadeur Daniel Foot pour nous être capable de parler ensemble avec lui. So, n'a pas prendre toute disposition pour lui. Dès lors qu'elle venait, n'a prendre live et puis n'a pas essayé pour nous traduire ça lui-même lui dit, mais nous apprécions que la majorité des monde qui ont même venu ensemble avec nous, c'est des gens qui parlent anglais très bien, donc ils comprennent ça que dit, donc ça facilite nous la tâche. Rendez-vous c'est pas le temps comme ça à 4 heures, donc on va le préparer scène pour lui, de telle sorte qu'il est capable de venir à 4 heures, mais n'attend tout le monde qui est là, qu'on y a là, partager live ça et commenter, abonner ensemble avec page là, et puis venir surtout à 4 heures pour capable venir et tendre Daniel Foot qui est là, il était après, alors ça qui arrive je dis là, il commençait ensemble avec Daniel Foot. Donc Daniel Foot a poussé longtemps pour Ariel Henry by démission parce qu'il trouvait que Ariel Henry pas travailler dans bon intérêt et population et haïtienne non, donc par conséquent il pensait Ariel t'a supposé by démission pendant depuis très longtemps et finalement semblait c'est sur ça on va dire bah c'est semblait c'est sur ça et Ariel Henry donc les mêmes liés nous allons parler avec lui à 4 heures et puis demain matin, nous avons gagné un représentant dans et CARICOM qui pouvait nous toutes les informations qui nécessaires sur l'état négociation, sur qui ça qui a décidé. Donc, dans la question Haïti à nous et pour un petit pause très bref, environ 30 minutes et puis nous tourné sur la même plateforme. Non, pas oublier, tourner venir à 4 heures, nous recevoir et donc ancien ambassadeur et Daniel Foot qui va le faire parler ensemble avec nous sur les derniers développements et situation haïtienne. Merci un peu.